So I think it's really important for a company when they have a win, whether that win is, it doesn't matter really what department it is. Maybe it's that they got a new contract, maybe that's they successfully turned over a new elevator after a big modernization project. Maybe they got an award. I think it's important to celebrate those wins with everybody,
Right.
from the guy in the warehouse to someone up at a front desk, to someone out in the field, management. Um, to me, like the companies that I've worked for that have done that successfully have been great to work at, and they've fostered just incredible achievements. I mean, just been so successful. So yeah, I would say celebrate the wins.
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. In this podcast, we talk to the people whose lives and careers are dedicated to the vertical transportation industry to inform and share lessons learned, building upon the foundation of those who have gone before to inspire the next generation of elevator careers.
Today our guest is Chris Pierce, co-owner of SkyTech Elevator in Austin, Texas. Chris started his career as a union apprentice with Omni Elevator at age 19. But after a few years, he left for a time to finish his degree and worked as a technician in the high-tech industry. After returning to the elevator industry, Chris realized he loved working on elevators and wanted to stay. Chris is passionate about using technology and transparency to drive results and deliver customer satisfaction.
So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be able to talk to you. I think you've got a fascinating story from what from previous conversations we've had, and obviously want to talk a little bit more about your career, and certainly from here on out, because you're starting a new business. You're looking to make some exciting, as I see it, some pretty exciting contributions to the elevator industry. But I would love to start at the beginning and just tell me, how did you get started in the elevator industry from the get-go?
So when I was 19, I was in college in Northern California. That's where my dad lived at the time. And I wasn't real focused on my studies. And my dad basically, he gave me an ultimatum, said that, I needed to find a job, that he was no longer going to support me in college. So I talked to my stepdad back in Texas, and he said, "Hey, I got a job for you." He owned and operated Omni Elevator. It was a pretty large independent in the state of Texas at the time. And so I moved back to Texas and went to work for him. Started out as a 50%er out in the field. We were a signatory company in the union, and spent probably about 2.5 years in the field. Worked up to being a 70%er.
Let's pause
And
for
then
just a second, if you don't mind pausing. So my
yeah.
question is, into college, not super motivated. Obviously, Dad wasn't super impressed with your track record. What was it that got you engaged in the elevator industry enough that you could kind of pull out of this funk of, oh, hey, I'm just failing out of college, or whatever it was you were doing?
Yeah, actually, great question. So, I grew up in San Antonio, and I didn't move to go live with my dad until I was in high school. But growing up during the summers, I would go to work with my stepdad, maybe as early as like 11 or 12 years old. And I can remember him taking me to some of his maintenance jobs, and he'd have me burnishing the contacts on an old Westinghouse controller, or showing me how to do maintenance on a door track, or just various things. And I always enjoyed, like when I was a kid, I'd take apart stuff, take apart my boom box and then put it back together.
That's impressive
RC
because
cars.
yeah, I used to take stuff apart, but I could never get them back together.
Well, I usually had an extra screw,
Okay. If it still worked, right? That's the magic
Yes,
sauce right
yes.
there.
But yeah, so I was interested in it. I really didn't know what I wanted to do at that age. And I think that's probably why college just wasn't really there for me, at that time. So yeah, it was great getting in there, getting the field experience, spent some time on modernizations, repair crew, and then I transitioned to being a maintenance helper. And I think that was primarily because I was always pretty good with the customers.
Okay.
And so I can remember we even had some maintenance mechanics at the time that they were great maintenance mechanics, but maybe their strong suit wasn't communication.
I hear you. Yeah.
So I could go in there with those mechanics, and it was a good marriage, I guess. A good fit between
So
me.
so it sounds like
and
you like the hands-on, but you also like the people aspect.
Absolutely, yeah. And really, years later, I left the industry for a little while, and then I came back. And when I came back, I went into sales.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about that detour. I think you said you'd gone to college, worked in high tech. What were some of the things you gained while you were outside?
So I moved back to California, which was Silicon Valley, and I got a job with a company that was manufacturing disk drives for the computer industry. And I was a technician. I worked on the capital equipment that built the disk drives. But I got a chance to work directly with a mechanical engineer and was essentially kind of a mechanical engineer assistant.
Mhm.
And he taught me, all sorts of things about being a mechanical engineer, from trained me how to do AutoCAD, mechanical desktop, how to create bills of material. I even did some procuring of parts and managing one of the subsystems for him. He kind of offloaded onto me, the one that he didn't want to deal with.
Of course.
But yeah, it was a great experience, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was some very transferable skills for me, that I absolutely been able to leverage in the elevator industry, years later and even to this day.
Yeah, yeah. So, and while you were out in California, I think you said you finished your college degree. Is that correct?
I didn't finish then, but yeah, I got a pretty good segue into it.
Well, and it sounds like the impression I'm getting is that you were a better student the second time around after having had some real life experience.
Very much so. Yes. Yeah.
And cool. So how long were you in high tech, building the disk drives and all of that?
So I'm gonna say I did that for about 3 years. And then I moved back to San Antonio and
Okay.
went to work for my stepfather again. This time in a sales role. And yeah, started out as a kind of sales representative for our Austin, Texas branch. And it was a small branch for us. It wasn't profitable. It was struggling.
Sure.
And so it was kind of a last ditch effort by him to see if maybe he could save that branch. And fortunately, we were successful in doing that. And
Cool.
While there, I guess taking a step back, when I first got into the industry, I had the pleasure of encountering somebody that became kind of a mentor of mine, and later a co-founder, a good friend,
Co-founder,
gentleman
if I
by the
may, in your current
yeah.
venture, and then
He is in my last current venture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But yeah, a gentleman by the name of Dan Bryant. And when I met him, I was a mod helper at University Hospital in San Antonio, and he was doing a fire service overlay on the old Otis controller. And he was there like making his own little solid state boards, these little
Wow.
breadboards with wires. And I was just like, wow, this guy's different, you know? And I was just very much drawn to him. So much so I actually got into trouble with the mod superintendent at the time because I was helping Dan more than I was helping my own mod mechanic that I was supposed
Sure.
to be working with. So I got reprimanded a little bit for that. But Dan always kind of stuck out of my mind. And when I took over the sales role years later in Austin, I went to my stepdad, and that was one of the big reasons why we were successful. Is I went to my stepdad and I told him, I said, hey, I would really like Dan Bryant to come on board with me here in Austin and help me with this branch. And he did. And from there, the story definitely grows into how I got into some of the other things I did after my time there.
Yeah, that's great. And you had mentioned in a previous conversation that things really kind of accelerated after your California experience. What were some of the things you took away from Silicon Valley, from working with hard drives and high tech? And you mentioned specifically this mechanical engineer that seems like he was really a mentor for you too, and maybe helped you get to that next level.
I think overall, more than anything, the passion for new technology there, right? Silicon Valley, and we see it here in Austin too, as kind of a sister city to Silicon Valley. It's just incredible. I mean, the risks that people will take to just jump in and do whatever it takes for something that they believe is going to change the world.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to change the world, but I think about it as, I think for me, like I very much want to change things in the elevator industry, or add value. And technology is such a great way to be able to do that. There's always something that somebody is developing that is just mind-blowing, and sometimes it doesn't work out, it isn't a good fit, and other times it might be 10-15 years too early.
Sure, that happens. Yeah.
And so I think just being around that kind of environment is just very engaging and just exciting.
Very cool. Very cool. So,
Yeah.
what point was it that that it clicked for you that, hey, not only do I love elevators, but I really want to marry up some of this technology with it, and like you said, drive change and drive, improvements.
Yeah. So it was that second stint at Omni Elevator. Dan was working on essentially like a ERP mobile time ticket system for independent elevator company, and we actually started developing it around Omni Elevators operations. And I think at the time we were probably one of the first independents in the country to have mobile time tickets. We were using,
Wow.
this was
Okay.
before smartphones. We were using Dell Axum PDAs. I mean, this
Wow.
was
Okay.
around 2002,
I'm chuckling because I'm
2003.
remembering the Palm Pilot that I used to carry around.
Yes.
And it,
Yeah, very similar. The Dell PDAs, they were Windows based, and
Sure.
so our software was Windows based. And so I got my first, I loved it. I mean, it was right up my alley to be involved in helping develop a platform to run the operations of an independent elevator company, from callback management to work order management, time tickets. We even had a portal to where our customers could log in and they could view
Wow.
the data online. And I just knew it. I was like, this is the way it's all going. This is awesome.
Sure.
Um, I think that was the point where I really realized that I could make this industry more exciting for myself than just what it had been for my stepdad for most of his life. He was
Sure.
blue collar. He was a great elevator troubleshooter. That wasn't me. That wasn't my story. I wasn't some exceptional troubleshooter. Mine was more about people and high tech.
Yeah. Well, and part of what I'm taking out of your story is about people, but also about making it more accessible for people, or making it easier for people. And the fact that you had
Mhm.
a portal, probably, years before I heard that term portal, or even thought about it. That's very impressive. And to go back to the people, is you're serving their needs by making it more transparent. And I've heard you say that word, results, transparency, um, just, hey, here's what it is, right? Here, I don't know what that looked like, but here's the ticket, and here's when we think we're going to get it done, and here's, whatever information we have
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah, I do believe that's one of the things that's really driving me these days, and has been for a long time, is I think I've always had a really good sense of being able to identify with people's pain points.
Mhm.
And the way that the industry is now, there's a lot of pain when it comes to the building owners and the property managers, and uh,
Let's
just
talk about some of those.
elevators break.
Yeah. Where are some of these pain points that you see?
Well, I think some of it is in that lack of transparency.
Mhm.
Um, Things are very profit driven in the industry, which is not a bad thing. But I think some of what's been lost is, many years ago, they saw their technician. A property manager would see their technician every week, every month. They
Sure.
had a relationship with them, and those things are gone, and they're just not as commonplace. And there's a host of reasons, right? The industry is just not the same. Times are not the same. People are
Sure. Sure.
busier. uh Now everybody lives and breathes by text message and an email. And um so that's where things like the technology, where the portals, or IoT, various software platforms, those things really can, in my view, can help enable that piece that's missing now, or kind of bring back some of that to where, maybe it's not as face-to-face relationship as much as it used to be, but it could still be a really solid, trustworthy relationship that they enjoy. You can still provide something that they love.
Sure.
And yeah, I that's what drives me with that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you brought that up. You talked about pain points and giving them, the information. What comes to mind is, being in recruiting and hiring, and years ago I was in HR, and kind of the one of the philosophies in my brain is that, you hire somebody who you can see taking away that pain, right? It's like I have this, not only fear that I'm going to hire the wrong person, but this problem that I need this person and their skills and their, they've got to be able to solve this particular problem. And the more they can convince me that they're the one, then the more likely they are to get the job, and just put me at
Sure.
ease, and kind of calm my fears. And I think I hear you kind of saying the same thing with technology and with information and transparency, that you're going to have everything you need, and therefore the fears can subside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no different with that could absolutely relate to like a property manager or a building owner. It's very similar. At the end of the day, like, people just want their elevators to run, right?
Sure.
In a perfect world, they would never break down. They would always be running. Maybe not in a perfect world for an elevator technician
Right.
that relies on going to fix them, but they're going to break. They're going to have problems. It's the nature of the beast, right?
Sure.
So, being able to do that in the most efficient and transparent way that it might sound kind of silly, but it makes people feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, yeah. Just knowing you're taking care of their problems, knowing that they can let go of the fear and the anxiety, and just know that, hey, this is going to be taken care of. And even if it
it's
does
being
break down,
resolved.
I know I can trust so and so to show up, take care of my, so that I'm not, having to stress about it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
That's very cool. So what led you to get into consulting? And we can talk a little bit more about your business, but what is it that kind of said, hey, it's time for me to jump out here on my own?
I think a large part, like it's all kind of been leading up to this. So I've had the pleasure of being in a lot of various roles over the years, whether it was sales to, operations, modernization, superintendent, new installation superintendent, just a lot of varied roles. And I think over the years, one thing that I continually kind of, and I always seem to kind of fall into these situations of where people are just calling me, asking me for advice,
Sure.
About their elevators. And sometimes it has been related to my job, was a lead or something like that. And those moments, I always come away from them feeling great. Like I've offered something to somebody in a way that they couldn't have got it from anybody else, maybe a unique approach to it. And the feedback that you get, those feel-good moments about really being able to help somebody with their elevator problem and hear them out. And maybe sometimes there isn't always a good solution, but just if nothing else, them feeling like they got something off of their chest or
Right.
Even situations like that are really good. I think that people component is a huge part of it, and that's ultimately what's been kind of driving more of the thoughts around consulting and how I can help people with all this elevator knowledge up there.
Right. Well, and it sounds like you are getting a lot of satisfaction out of doing exactly that. Like you say, it sounds like
Yeah.
you've been building your understanding, your broad base of knowledge and of what's going on. And so when you go to somebody who has an elevator and a problem and the worries or whatever they've got around that, you can address it with that. Just the same kind of empathy that you described early on, that you kind of get people issues. And
Yeah,
so,
you could see for me, it's very relatable. Like, and I think it's all, I think everybody's, kind of their own individual. It's kind of its own situation and everything. And if you can recognize that uniqueness in each person that you're talking to, in each situation that they're in, it becomes really easy to be able to pull from all the varied things that you've heard over the years and be able to add value somewhere or be able to help people in a unique way that maybe others aren't able to.
Right. So would you consider yourself a similar to other consulting firms in how you approach it, or do you have some different maybe technology offerings or something that sets you apart from some of the others?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I'm not entirely sure yet. My sense is that my focus is a little bit different, definitely with, such a strong technology background.
Mhm.
Um, something that we haven't really touched on would be a company that I co-founded with Dan years later, like around 2014, 2015, called Data Hoist. And we were building
Okay. Tell me about that.
remote monitoring devices. It was leveraging essentially sensor technology and cloud edge computing, what now people refer to as IoT, and
Sure.
it's become more of a common household name. Um, but when I look at consulting these days, to me, it seems like some of these things could be leveraged to help with, maybe as simple as doing a higher level of elevator asset management.
Okay.
Or people are starting to ask about, they want KPIs, and they want callback reporting, various things to be able to help them make their business decisions that they need to make, whether
Right.
it's when I need to mod an elevator, or, and to me, some of like the traditional consulting companies, a lot of them seem like a lot of it is based off of, writing documents,
Okay.
a heavy
Sure.
dose of that. And I know that there are those out there that do some of the things I'm talking about, and have been for a while. But I think one can take it maybe a step further with the transparency and leveraging some of these newer technologies, whether it's a software platform or a sensor device that goes on top of the elevator. When you start incorporating the data from all those various sources, um, through the use of software as well, it really starts getting really very compelling. It's not all that interesting by itself.
Right.
So some usage statistics on an elevator. Yeah, they're, if you just, the elevator ran 1,500 times last month,
Right.
oh, okay, great. That's really not all that interesting by itself. But when you incorporate that with some other data, maybe some field data from what the elevator technician is seeing out there, or what a building manager, facility manager is seeing. Once you start to pull all that together, I think that's where it gets really interesting, and what you can offer people.
Right. Right. Well, and what I'm hearing you saying is, with transparency, not only am I going to let my customer know that, hey, this ran 1,500 times last month, but maybe I'm going to let them know that, as far as wear and tear goes, kind of like, for lack of a better, metaphor here or analogy, whatever, brake pads, right? It's like, hey, you've only got X number, X amount left before this really needs to be replaced. Um, I don't know enough about elevators to say they have the same kind of things, but I'm sure there's a way to measure ropes or whatever, shivs or brakes, or, some of those different pieces that you do replace, and say, hey, you know, by the next time, we really need to be doing this, and then delivering that to them. They may call you and say, hey, guys, it's time for an oil change. Guys, hey, we're ready for you to, come do this repair, because all this information you've given us is telling us that it needs to happen. So please come do it.
Yes, yeah, and it's that's a great point. And while there's other companies that have been working on this stuff that have their own IoT solutions. And it's all great, but I think it's really important to leverage that data in the right way. I've heard, some people talk about well, I never see my elevator technician anymore since we got this IoT device on our
Right.
elevator. And so that's not the right way. You know, I think if people can gear it more towards, you know, using it as a tool versus to maybe take a more targeted approach to their maintenance versus to saying, oh, well, we don't need to go out there now because the device hasn't told us that anything's required yet,
Yeah.
you
How would you
know?
envision that? Yeah, talk me through what is the right way kind of in your mind?
Well, I think the right way to do it is to try to incorporate the data from all the various sources that I talked about, and not really so much a shift in the way we know how to do elevator maintenance, because I think we all know like really what needs to happen. I mean,
Sure.
you know, some of it is just janitorial. You know, you got to go out there and clean off a car top. Is when you're doing that, maybe you find a bolt missing or a
Sure.
belt's not in good condition. And these devices aren't going to always pick up on some of that. Some of them
Sure.
are great and they will eventually start to pick up on that. But I think it has to be an approach where, you know, you're still going out there and taking care of the customer and doing the visits.
Okay.
Um,
So the human touch, I hear, is what I hear
yeah,
you saying.
I think that's still
Yeah.
really important. Now, maybe it's not in a situation where it used to be where you spend your technician spending 15, 20 minutes with the building manager after he did his maintenance, you know, just talking about whatever and hanging out. Because the world is just, it's changed, you know, people
Sure.
are busier, moving around more. But you could use technology to be able to say, hey, he got it, he just left. I just got a notification on my phone that my elevator man
Yeah.
left, you know. Maybe it includes a picture of what he did or what he found, you know. I think there's still a way to engage with the customers and provide them with that, with a really high level of maintenance and transparency and everything, and still be able to move fast and do what's needed in today's economy.
Good. Good. No, thank you. Thank you. And you know, as we're kind of getting towards the end of our time, but I'm just curious, what's one of the biggest lessons you've learned throughout your career?
You know, I one of the things I learned from my dad early on was celebrating the wins. So I think it's really important for a company when they have a win, whether that win is, you know, it doesn't matter really what department it is. You know, maybe it's that they got a new contract, maybe that's they successfully turned over a new elevator after a big modernization project. You know, maybe they got an award. I think it's important to celebrate those wins with everybody. You
Right.
know, from the guy in the warehouse to, you know, someone up at a front desk, to someone out in the field, you know, management. Um, to me, like the companies that I've worked for that have done that successfully have been great to work at, and they've fostered just incredible achievements. I mean, just been so successful. So yeah, I would say celebrate the wins.
Beautiful. No, it sounds like from your perspective, that really drives the desire to make more wins, the desire to really dig in and make great stuff happen. So thank you for sharing that. The last question I want to ask you as we wrap up is, what's one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's maybe they're new to the industry, not even sure what they've latched into? What would you tell them as they kind of start this journey?
Sure. I tell people that there's a lot of different paths you can go in this industry. if it's somebody that's in the field, you can be new equipment installation, you could be mods, you could be repair, you could be a maintenance tech. They all have kind of their own things, right? You could get into sales, you could get into management, you could get on the tech side, software side. It's so varied. There's so many paths, and I've seen people, start out like myself, out in the field, and now they're doing something completely different, still within the industry, but being a maintenance tech wasn't their path. They write software code.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a wealth of opportunity in the industry, and I would tell someone to kind of find their niche, what they like, and then follow that path. The opportunities there.
Right. Great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Chris. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think you're a kind of a living witness of that you can bounce around a lot of different ways. You kind of find your own path and then build from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. You can check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.